Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Fem Kurama Was Naruto's Mother, Part 4. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
To both Naruto and Hinata's surprise, they ended up staying at the festival for quite some time. They played games and bought trinkets with Hinata's allowance. They saw at least one play, a musical, and even watched the parade multiple times throughout the day. Aside from spending time with his mother, Naruto had the most fun he'd ever had. Hinata kept a contented smile on her face the entire time, watching Naruto run from event to event like a kid in a candy store. Hinata's heart was warmed by seeing him so happy. Her love for Naruto grew stronger with each passing minute. Hinata watched as Naruto ran in large circles, trailed by an Inuzuka clan kite shaped like a dog high in the air. He was running around Hinata with a big grin on his face. Hinata's gaze was fixed, mesmerized. She didn't know what love was if this wasn't it. After a few minutes, Naruto slowed down, approaching Hinata and lowering the kite. He came to a halt in front of her, his eyes locked on hers. Hinata remained silent, barely making eye contact. Naruto leaned in for a quick smooch against her nose. "I know it's getting late, but if you don't mind, I was thinking of going to one more event," Naruto said, looking up at the sky. The sun had just set but was still visible on the horizon. The night sky was filled with fireworks at this point, which illuminated the slowly darkening streets. Many people were already watching a large fireworks display. Hinata laughed quietly while nodding her head. "You don't have to ask my permission, Naru-kun, we can stay as long as you want," Hinata said, taking a step forward and grasping his hand, their fingers intertwining. Naruto affectionately squeezed her hands before turning around and heading towards the fireworks. They had some walking to do because it was quite far away. They weren't bothered because they'd been walking all day. They walked alone for a while, enjoying the privacy because most people were already at the firework display. Naruto still had the kite flying behind him. It was windy enough for him to float rather than run. As the two rounded a corner, they noticed a large crowd of people heading towards the fireworks. Naruto sped up to catch up to the group, succeeding in blending in. Naruto was certain he hadn't been recognized because of his mask, kimono, and feminine figure. He hadn't given it a second thought in hours. As they continued on their journey, a massive display of fireworks exploded in the sky about a mile away. Hinata and Naruto both gasped, their eyes twinkling. "Isn't it lovely, Naru-kun?" Hinata exclaimed. Her favorite part of the festival was always this. Naruto couldn't help but agree. He'd never seen the fireworks this close before. Her words drew Naruto's attention, causing him to shift his gaze away from the fireworks and toward Hinata's stunned expression. "Thank you for this, Hinata-chan," he said softly. Hinata looks away from the fireworks because Naruto's voice was too quiet, the effeminate tween speaking to himself rather than directly to her. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted when an alarmed voice interrupted his admiration for her face. "Naruto, I don't like this," Midnight said concernedly into Naruto's mind. Naruto was taken aback when he heard Midnight's voice. She hadn't spoken in a long time, having been too preoccupied with watching the two on their date. She remained in her fox form as usual, acting as Naruto's scarf. Naruto frowned slightly, perplexed. "What do you mean?" Naruto inquired before his instincts took over. Naruto and Hinata were in the middle of a large crowd. But as Naruto looked around, he noticed that no one around him was looking up at the fireworks. No, they were all looking forward. Naruto focused his attention on a single face, the profile of a woman. Unlike the other faces he'd noticed all day, hers was one of restrained malice rather than joy and exhilaration. That was all Naruto needed to see in order to fully comprehend what was going on. Despite this realization, Naruto remained calm, smiling brightly and returning his attention to Hinata. "Hinata-chan, I don't want to miss out on seeing any of the fireworks up close, so let's hurry." Naruto squeezed her hand. Hinata, who was no wiser, was eager to comply. "Okay, Naru," Hinata started to say before being abruptly silenced by a hand cupped over her mouth. Hinata was then yanked off her feet and dragged away by a large man who wrapped his arms around her stomach and lifted her into the air. Naruto and Hinata's eyes widened in surprise. As their fingers slipped away from one another, they both desperately reached out to the other. Within Naruto's mind, the next few moments seemed to move in slow motion. An angry voice drew Naruto's attention to the side before he could respond properly. "How dare you show your face here, demon?" screamed the owner, who was holding a kitchen knife in a stabbing motion towards Naruto's head. Naruto, being a demon, a child trained as a shinobi, and a killer in the making like all his peers, was already fully prepared to defend himself when he turned to see that knife coming down on him. His body was already prepared to repel any attack that came his way. But everything changed when he saw the woman's angry face. The position she was in, that knife, everything, it was like a nightmare. Naruto went completely still, his body not responding. He wasn't able to move an inch. All he could feel was fear and helplessness. Despite his monstrous power, his brain could only revert to the helpless little boy he had been before his mother adopted him. The same one crawling through alleyways, attempting to avoid the wrath of his fellow villagers. Naruto thrust his delicate hands in front of his face, not to defend himself, but to cower. That knife slashed clean through Naruto's collarbone. Naruto screamed in agony, his tiny, vulnerable, high-pitched voice filling the room. Hinata, who was still being dragged away, watched in horror as a mob of villagers converged on Naruto. Within seconds, the boy had been stabbed, punched, and impaled with various weapons. Punches, kicks, and even a kunai. It all happened so fast that Hinata couldn't keep track of what was going on. Hinata awoke from her trance when she heard Naruto's agonizing, high-pitched shriek. The girl's body moved almost on its own. Hinata rammed a powerful elbow into the man who was still carrying her away, causing him to spit up blood and hunch over in pain and surprise. The tween then jumped away and landed a bone-crushing kick across his jaw as she twirled around, using his leg to push off of. The man flipped backwards and landed face first on the pavement, completely unconscious. Hinata then turned around and began sprinting towards her love, Naruto. She screamed as her feet landed on the ground. But as soon as they did, two figures appeared at her side at speeds that no ordinary villager could have achieved. "Calm down, girl. Leave it to the adults," one of them said as he reached for Hinata. Hinata paused, allowing one of them to seize her arm. They were both shinobi. Shinobi from Leaf Village. They weren't wearing headbands, but she could tell by how they moved. As they prepared to pull her away, the girl was conflicted. Was she going to attack the shinobi of Leaf Village? That is a serious offense. Yelled that familiar voice, causing Hinata's Byakugan to flare once more. Naruto was cowering on the ground, curled into a ball and covered in blood, she could see. His tears were visible to her. 8 trigrams palms revolving heaven, exclaimed Hinata as a chakra aura seeped from her body. At the same time, the girl spun quickly on her heels, instantly conjuring up a massive spinning aura of chakra that sent the two shinobi crashing through the walls of a nearby building, stunned. Simultaneously, Naruto remained hunched over on the ground, his arms wrapped around his own torso as a constant barrage of sharp objects and vicious assaults rained down on him. Naruto looked up in shock, his vision red from the blood on his body. His tiny body was riddled with gashes and freshly formed scars. The boy's skin was purple from broken bones as the crowd crushed his frame with their feet, bricks, large rocks, and whatever else they could find. He'd let out a pitiful shriek every few seconds from the pain. These reactions were uncontrollable, but worse than the pain, fear, isolation, darkness, and hatred directed at him was his internal turmoil. The agony of realizing that, despite his dominance, he was still at their mercy. Why would they not? He needed to stop this. He needed to get up. He needed to run. He needed to protect himself. He needed to do something. Anything. Why couldn't he get up? Why was he so ineffective? He had to stop this because if he didn't, someone else would. Despite everything that was going on, Naruto was concerned about someone else. Someone who wasn't so helpless. Someone he didn't want to have to rely on. Someone he didn't want to have to feel his pain, to go through what he had shamefully gone through. No, don't. Please, don't please. Please, Naruto pleaded over and over, but he wasn't addressing the audience. He was barely audible. No, they weren't the ones he was really worried about. Hinata moved quickly through the crowd, attempting to cause as little damage as possible. She was taking much longer than she wanted because there were so many people. She dispatched a dozen villagers in a matter of seconds, chopping their necks, kicking them to the side, and delivering palm strikes to their back. Despite how easy it would be to kill them if she went all out, she only used non-lethal blows. Stop, please stop, Hinata pleaded, tears streaming down her cheeks. He needed her even though she was so far away. Why would they do such a thing? What the hell was going on? Stop, Hinata yelled out as loudly as she could. The world seemed to be heading in her direction as she yelled that desperate word. When she opened her eyes after crying out, she saw that everyone around her had stopped what they were doing. They were all looking forward. Hinata could see fear on their faces when she got a closer look. When she turned her gaze to Naruto, it was clear why. Naruto's body was glowing a deep, dark red with demonic chakra. The villagers who surrounded his laying body were slowly backing away, each with a terrified expression on their face. The chakra violently thrashed around Naruto, causing the ground to tremble. The chakra, however, was not coming from Naruto specifically. No, it was emitted by his scarf. The scarf slowly unraveled, revealing a small black-furred baby fox. The fox leapt from Naruto's shoulder, but before it hit the ground, it transformed into Midnight's demonic, humanoid form. Her face was contorted into a hellish snarl, red chakra lashing out chaotically around her. Her claws were bared as her hands hung by her side. Her razor-sharp teeth were on full display, as were her pitch-black eyes, which stared daggers into the crowd. "Please don't, please," pleaded Naruto from his helpless laying position on the ground. Naruto reached forward with a shaky, bloodied hand, weakly grasping Midnight's ankle. "Please," Naruto begged one last time before Midnight vanished from view, much to everyone's surprise. "Gah!" yelled a man standing closest to Naruto, his voice filled with pain. Everyone turned to face the voice, only to see a man clutching his side in agony. His arm gone, and only a bloody gash where his right arm should have been. Midnight then appeared in front of him, her teeth clenched around his arm. She bit it until the appendage snapped in half. The girl then slowly turned her head towards the rest of the crowd, and the mob erupted in panic, with everyone turning on their heels and attempting to flee for their lives, most screaming at the top of their lungs. Midnight gave a sadistic grin as a dark blue flame appeared in her palm. She slammed it into the bloody socket of the man she'd just dismembered, severing his wound. He was wailing on the ground as more pain shot through his body. She had no intention of killing him. That would be far too good for him. Midnight vanished after quickly cauterizing the wound. People began to collapse within seconds as limbs were violently torn from their bodies, only to have their wounds seared shut with blue demonic fire. Midnight ripped arms, legs, fingers, and hands from anyone she could find as the crowd dispersed. Hinata remained in her original position, the girl frozen in place as her Byakugan witnessed every detail of Midnight's cruelty. Dozens of people were strewn about, screaming in agony on the ground. The street was splattered with blood. It was like something out of a nightmare. Naruto was now kneeling on the ground, tears streaming down his cheeks as he watched helplessly. How could he possibly stop her? Did he intend to put a stop to her? Why was he so ineffective? He closed his eyes and lifted small, dainty hands to cover his ears. Hinata stood a few feet away from Naruto, her mind racing with similar thoughts. Her thoughts, on the other hand, were a lot more jumbled. Confusion and terror coursed through her adolescent form. Even though Naruto was only a few feet away, she couldn't reach him or console him. She could only tremble and stand there. As she stood motionless, the girl was startled awake by an arm grabbing her around the waist. When she found herself being lifted into the air and onto a roof, her eyes widened. "Are you all right?" asked a voice from behind an Anbu mask. Hinata stared at the mask, clearly perplexed. The masked figure took note of her response before picking up her bridal gown and leaping away from the scene. As she was being carried away, she noticed several shinobi figures approaching Midnight. Naruto kept his eyes tightly shut, but opened them when he felt pressure around his legs and back. He flinched, expecting more pain, but none came. All of the cuts, bruises, and gashes on his body had healed by this point. Despite the fact that the boy was covered in blood and his clothes were ripped to shreds, his kimono was barely hanging off his shoulders. Naruto's delicate body was raised, causing the boy to open his eyes and see the face of a masked man wearing a shinobi headband. The man's headband was pulled down to cover one of his eyes. The man leapt into the air just as Midnight flew beneath him, the girl digging her claws into the ground to halt her movement. She was sliding backwards as if pushed by a force. The man, now dressed in Naruto bridal style, jumped onto a roof, joining a number of other masked shinobi on the roofs, their weapons bared, looking down at the scene. Midnight was now on all fours, her demonic gaze darting daggers at the man in front of her who had sent her flying. A man dressed in a green uniform. He had a bowl-shaped haircut and thick brows, and his eyes were narrowed toward Midnight. He moved slowly towards her as shinobi dropped down around him, picking up and jumping away with the various dismembered villagers. "What are you?" the man asked, taking an upright fighting stance with one arm behind his back and his free hand in front of him in a chopping position. Midnight reacted with a low, feral growl, her foxtails thrashing behind her as she raised her buttocks high and prepared to pounce. Noticing this, the man nodded his head and remained motionless, giving his allies enough time to retrieve every bloody victim. "Regardless, your rampage comes to an end here. Regardless, your rampage ends here," the men in green stated emphatically. Midnight immediately charged, sprinting forward on all fours. The speed with which she moved surprised the sea of shinobi who had quarantined the area. Midnight jumped towards him in less than a second, spinning horizontally so her tails would lash out at him. The man was alert enough to notice the fur on her tail standing up at the last second. He widened his eyes before leaping backwards, completely avoiding those tails. He dodged. Midnight exclaimed in disbelief as the man quickly counterattacked by lunging forward with a powerful punch. Midnight was twirling in midair, her mobility limited. "I've got her," the man thought as his fist was just inches away from crushing her spine. Everyone was taken aback by what happened next. One of the tails that had missed the man instead landed on the ground, becoming entangled in the concrete. Midnight used it as leverage to spin herself even faster, delivering a bone-crushing kick square across the man's jaw just as he landed his punch. The force of the kick knocked the man backwards. "Guy!" cried a chorus of voices from a few shinobi who had jumped off their respective roofs, and were now descending upon Midnight to join the fight. Guy recovered quickly despite the blow, performing a series of backflips to stabilize himself. He stopped himself from sliding back before quickly standing up, an alarmed expression on his face. "No, stay back," he screamed as he dashed forward to rejoin the fight. But it was too late. Midnight had already leapt into the air to meet the 4 shinobi wearing ambu masks. 3 of the shinobi hurled kunai at Midnight's form as she jumped up towards them. She spun around in the air like a top, the thin red aura of chakra surrounding her acting as a barrier against which the kunai bounced harmlessly. Midnight had already descended on them as one of the shinobi was making hand signs for a jutsu. Midnight's tails cracked like whips as she spun around at breakneck speed, tearing through the group like paper. They didn't even have time to defend themselves because she was too fast for them. They were shredded to shreds, her spiky tail chopping them in half and tearing through them in the most vicious way possible. Only one was quick enough to defend themselves, the shinobi deflecting Midnight's attack and being pushed away from the carnage. But that shinobi didn't get very far. A large dark flame shot from Midnight's mouth, engulfing his entire body and instantly burning him alive. The fires were so hot that he didn't feel any pain, the shinobi dying so quickly that his brain couldn't tell his body to feel pain. Midnight then descended with a series of front flips before landing in a low crouch and sweeping one leg outward in a large circle. As she finally fell into her fighting stance, she outstretched both her arms, performing a small intricate dance. The girl's body was low, with her entire weight supported by her back leg. Her front leg was outstretched in front of her, toes pointing up. One of her clawed hands was reaching for her toes. Her opposite hand was outstretched, all of her fingers contorted into a clawed shape. Midnight's body was still, her eyes focused, and her balance was perfect despite the fact that she was standing on one foot. As she took that stance, a hail of gore and blood rained down on her, and dismembered limbs and guts landed unceremoniously on the ground around her, the remains of the group she'd just torn apart. Midnight had purposefully settled beneath where she expected those body parts to land. She was covered in blood from head to toe, truly resembling something from hell. Everyone appeared to be frozen in time as they processed what had just occurred. The events had become transparent in a matter of seconds. A man known as Kakashi was swiftly analyzing the situation, replaying the battle in his head from atop a roof, still holding Naruto's vulnerable form. Its speed is inhuman. It was fast enough to counter Guy's punch by using its tail as an anchor. It's surrounded by a defensive aura and uses its tails as both offensive weapons and utilities. The way it moves is calculated, precise. We're not dealing with some wild beast. It's intelligent, the man thought to himself as he shifted his gaze over to a black-haired woman with red eyes standing a few feet away. When the woman caught his gaze, she dashed over, only for Kakashi to carefully hand Naruto over to her. "Kurenai, take her, and tell those below Jounin level to back off because they will be liabilities at this point," Kakashi said as the woman carefully lifted Naruto and held him bridal style. Given Naruto's appearance, Kakashi mistook him for a girl. Naruto was shaking from witnessing the entire event. His mind was racing, and he had no idea what to do. "Don't look, sweetie," the woman said softly to Naruto, raising her hand to make a few shinobi gestures. The majority of the observing shinobi saw the sign and began to back up. "I tried genjutsu on it," the woman said solemnly, her gaze fixed on Midnight. Kurenai instinctively cradled Naruto's head against her breasts, making sure he wasn't looking. Kakashi raised his headband, revealing his sharing an eye. "I know," he said hauntingly before sprinting down to join the fight. He remembered seeing Kurenai use jutsu to trap Midnight before she was able to take out those 4 shinobi. Kurenai's genjutsu had no effect on that thing, despite the fact that she was one of Konoha's top genjutsu masters. Despite having his head buried in the soft nook of Kurenai's bosom, Naruto could see everything. A demon's eyes, like the Hyuga Byakugan, had 360-degree vision. Even though Naruto couldn't see the scene, he was able to perceive the world as Midnight did thanks to his demonic connection. He could feel her rage, see through her eyes as Guy approached her, see her caution as Kakashi took a position a few yards behind her, smell the blood on her fur, feel Midnight gathering chakra to prepare to lash out. But most of all, he could feel her anxiety. Kyuubi, Naruto's inner mind, kept a close eye on the action from her cage. She was linked to both of them. She was linked to Naruto because he was still technically her jailer, albeit to a lesser extent. The seal that bound Kyuubi to Naruto was ineffective. She could be free at any time, but she chose to remain bound to her son for a variety of reasons she kept to herself. Her bond with Midnight was innate among full demons. In many ways, Kyuubi was closer to Midnight than she was to her own son, at least for the time being. Kyuubi could see and experience the world through both of their eyes as a result of this connection. Kyuubi's presence hovered over their shoulders like an invisible, incorporeal guardian angel. She appeared as a ghost behind Midnight, looking down at the surrounded adolescent vixen. She represents the demon fox style well, the style of teeth, claw, and tail. It's no surprise she won the tournament and passed through the gate. She's even using terror tactics as self-defense. Kyuubi pondered as he looked at Midnight's blood-splattered form. Kyuubi's gaze was drawn to the two shinobi closing in on Midnight. The fact that she felt the need to resort to those tactics indicates that she isn't confident she can win this fight. Kyuubi continued, her gaze fixed on Midnight's bared teeth and thrashing tails. This was not the behavior of a controlled demon. This was the reaction of a cornered animal. Kyuubi then looked up to where Kurenai was holding Naruto on the roof. Naruto, no matter what happens, you cannot respond. They cannot discover that you know Midnight, Kyuubi told Naruto inside his head. Naruto's eyes widened as dread welled up within him. He didn't say anything or question his mother. He knew she wouldn't give that order lightly. Though the effeminate boy didn't need to ask why. The tween was smart enough to figure out what Kyuubi did while experiencing Midnight's emotions. She could lose. This thought was reinforced when they all noticed the man in green suddenly speak out in hushed tones as he approached Midnight. Guy said in a haunting whisper, "Third gate of life, release." Guy's skin turned bright red, his brow furrowed, and his eyes squinted in focus. The earth around him was rumbling, with pebbles and dirt rising and disintegrating around him. Midnight tensed, bracing herself for anything before the man charged at her at breakneck speed. Dust kicked up from where he had been in the wake of his speed. Guy sent a lightning-fast side kick towards Midnight's head in an instant. Midnight appeared completely unprepared, her arms in no position to defend herself, but both her tails launched forward to absorb the impact before the kick landed. Midnight winced as a few bones in her tails broke, but the kick was effectively stopped, allowing the girl to respond with a claw aimed at his heart. Guy was taken aback by her ability to respond quickly enough to block his attack. He swerved quickly, jumping off Midnight's tails and flipping forward to land an axe kick on her head. Midnight dodged it by empowering her muscles with demonic chakra, the girl lashing out with her tails, which were healing as she fought. The two then began to vanish and reappear at breakneck speeds, their collisions leaving small sonic booms in their wake. The majority of the shinobi were in awe of the inhuman display. Kakashi was making rapid hand gestures before shouting from a distance. "Now," he yelled, causing Guy to kick her in the midsection. Midnight used her tails to block the blow once more, this time strengthening the muscles with her own demonic chakra. But this kick wasn't meant to hurt anyone. It was just a push. Midnight was thrown backwards by the force of the kick, her feet dragging in the dirt as she tried to stop herself. A huge plume of fire rushed from behind her, completely enveloping the girl's body before she could recover. As the powerful jutsu faded, Kakashi held his hand in front of his mouth, his eyes narrowed. Guy stood vigilantly across the street, despite the fact that his right leg was covered in blood. Attacking Midnight's razor-sharp tails had resulted in multiple gashes along his shins. Nothing was too much for him. Midnight's blazing form stood motionless for a moment before she began to walk forward. The fire that had engulfed her body had vanished, replaced by a blue aura of darker fire. Midnight stood up straight, her arms casually wrapped around her own belly, as the flames suddenly went out, leaving her body smoking. Her dark eyes stared straight ahead. She was unharmed in any way. Fire against a demon. Really? Midnight sneered, whipping her tails, causing blood to splatter across the ground, a combination of Guy's and her own. Her body, however, was bruised, with multiple broken bones from her fight with Guy. "So you can speak," Guy said, taking a horse stance and crossing his arms in front of him in the shape of an X. Kakashi saw where this was going. As electricity began to crackle around his hand, he grabbed his arm. "You're a demon. Where did you come from? Why are you here?" Kakashi exclaimed as his gaze darted up to Kurenai. The women had been trying genjutsu for the entire time with no success. She saw Kakashi's expression and knew right away. "Fall back, everyone," she exclaimed as she jumped off her roof and moved to a safer distance. As soon as she gave that order, other shinobi began to flee to safer distances. When they did, a hail of shuriken began to fall like rain on the battlefield. Midnight clenched her teeth before spinning around and surrounding herself in demonic chakra, deflecting the majority of those blades. Though she was caught off guard when many of them began to explode. She was bombarded with exploding kunai artillery. The girl had to concentrate harder, channeling more energy into her demonic chakra aura. She was immune to fire, but explosions were a different story. But this was just a ruse to divert her attention away from the fact that Guy was opening more gates. "Fifth gate, gate of pain release," yelled the thick-bowed man before bursting forward with a newfound speed that Midnight wasn't expecting. Guy suddenly appeared in front of Midnight, his movements obscured by a random explosion. He delivered a crushing kick upwards into her chin, straight past her tail's defense. Midnight was launched into the skies. Guy appeared above her in less than a second, winding up a powerful punch. Kakashi was flying up towards her from below, his chidori screeching in his hand. They were ready to deliver a pincer strike from both her front and back. Midnight instinctively moved to defend herself, but to her surprise, her entire body was frozen. "I can't move," she exclaimed as the attacks approached her body. The world was slowing down as her mind raced. Why couldn't she get up? Her entire body was limp. 4 inches, 3 inches, and 2 inches. Those attacks were getting closer. Midnight's demonic eyes spotted the source of her immobility just before Guy and Kakashi's attacks connected. A shinobi on a roof below her had his hands contorted into a foreign hand sign, at least unfamiliar to her. Midnight didn't need to recognize the hand sign to grasp the gist of what was going on. With her demonic eyes, she saw his chakra connect to her body, binding her in chains that normal eyes couldn't see. Chakra in its true form could be seen by a demon's eyes. She would have noticed it if the explosions hadn't distracted her. She made a mistake. The shinobi below was binding Midnight's shadow with his shadow, the Nara clan's signature move. Midnight searched Kyuubi's memory in the split second before the impact of those 2 attacks in an attempt to fully comprehend what was happening to her. Kyuubi, despite her age, was aware of this jutsu but was unable to pass it on to the younger demoness in time. Kyuubi slowed down the entire sequence of events. Midnight understood what was going on, and she saw where she went wrong. Nonetheless, she was defeated. Chidori, Secret Lotus. This was followed by a slew of vicious attacks. Kakashi sped past Midnight, severing one of her tails and leaving a massive gash in her remaining tail. Guy slammed an earth-shattering fist and foot directly into the girl's gut, sending her crashing down to the ground at 100 miles per hour. The impact caused a massive earthquake, shattering the glass of nearby buildings and causing a few older structures to collapse completely. Still in Kurenai's arms, Naruto cradled his head with both his dainty hands and squeezed his eyes shut, his entire body quivering. Kurenai looked down at him, concerned, before abruptly fleeing the scene. She'd stayed far too long. Naruto was carried away to safety by her. Kurenai placed a gentle hand against the back of Naruto's head, pressing his face back into her bosom as he tried to lift his head to look directly at the scene. "Don't look. It's okay, sweetie. You're safe. You're going to be fine," she said motherly as she jumped from building to building. This, of course, had no effect on the upset tween. Midnight, Naruto called out through their link, but received no response. She didn't respond for the first time since he'd met her. Panic wasn't quite enough to describe Naruto's situation. Not hearing Midnight's voice for the first time upon his request left Naruto with an unfathomable void. A soothing voice spoke to him before he did something he'd later regret. "Naruto, come to me." A soft breeze blew through Naruto's silky blonde hair as his eyes opened. He was in a large grassy field, with the moonlight shining brightly above him. There was no artificial light to pollute the sky's countless stars' glow. A few yards away stood the regal figure of Kyuubi, the woman gazing out on a vast sea from the top of a tall cliff. Her dark red locks fluttered in the breeze as well, her back to Naruto. She slowly turned around and looked down at her son, calm and sympathetic. Naruto dashed over to her, slamming his face against her cushiony, covered breasts, wrapping his arms around her waist and squeezing her tightly. She wore her usual kimono, encircling his head with her sleeved arms and gently caressing his scalp. "Midnight, she won't talk to me. Tell me she's okay," Naruto cried out desperately, raising his head and looking up to Kyuubi with tear-filled eyes. "For the time being, sweetheart," Kyuubi said cryptically with a reserved expression. That was not the response he had hoped for. His eyes were pleading. What's going to happen to her? I can't see her. I can't feel her, Naruto screamed. Kyuubi didn't respond right away, the woman raising her head to look off into space, trying to figure out how to best respond to her baby. The boy's slender fingers lightly digging into the fabric of Kyuubi's kimono filled Naruto with anxiety during the pause. What did she intend to say? Naruto's mind was filled with horrible thoughts of never seeing her again. It was excruciating. Say something, Naruto finally exclaimed. Despite his anguish, his voice was barely audible, the words leaving his throat more as a whimper than a shout. Kyuubi's calm expression contrasted sharply with her son's panic. Listen carefully, Naruto. What I'm about to say will be very upsetting, but I need you to stay calm. At least on the outside. Do you understand, sweetheart? My angel, my sweet boy, promise me you'll stay calm. At least on the outside. Kyuubi spoke gently, each word causing panic to rise in Naruto's chest. His tiny body trembled uncontrollably, so much so that his real self was trembling as well, drawing Kurenai's attention from the outside. Kyuubi knelt down to meet Naruto on his level, looking him in the eyes and bringing both her hands up to lightly grasp both sides of his face. He was a complete shambles. Promise me, son, she said again, her gaze fixed on him. Naruto drew his hands back and pressed them against his chest, the boy more emotional than she had ever seen him. He managed to stifle those words. I promise, the effeminate tween squeaked out. When Kyuubi heard those words, she leaned forward, one arm around his skinny waist and the other against the back of his head. She rubbed her cheek against his, her face expressionless. They're going to kidnap her. Naruto remained motionless for a long time, his eyes fixed in disbelief in the distance. He slid his hands beneath the woman's armpits and clutched the fabric along her back tightly. His eyes welled up with new tears. His world began to shatter as he began to shake his head frantically. No, mommy. Please, mommy, screamed Naruto before his vision returned. Naruto began to regress, only to be caught in Kyuubi's grasp. She picked him up in a bridal carriage. The boy had passed out. Kyuubi walked to the cliff's edge, her baby cradled possessively and protectively in her arms, the woman now gazing out at the sea. Despite the circumstances, the ancient demon kept her cool, her fiery eyes narrowing. Finally it starts. Discomfort. That was the most gentle way to express how she felt. Midnight's eyes slowly opened, her vision blurry at first but gradually becoming clearer. A man sat on a chair in front of her, a clipboard in his hands, and stared at her stoically. Midnight memorized all of his physical characteristics. Even as he sat in that chair, the man's figure was imposing, with 2 large scars across his face. He was wearing a metal forehead protector with the Leaf Village symbol etched into it. A dark trench coat over a blue uniform adorned his middle-aged frame. Midnight kept her pitch-black orb stoically staring straight into his eyes. For a while, the man stared back in silence, clearly attempting to intimidate her. He clearly didn't know who or what he was up against. Midnight began to analyze her surroundings as she stared at the man. Given her demonic eyes, her 360-degree field of vision allowed her to scan her surroundings without looking away from her intense staring session with the man. Midnight was in a bare room with stone walls. There was a large mirror on one wall in which she could see herself. Both of her arms were held up by shackles that were attached to a chain that hung from the ceiling. Kanji were etched into the metal chain. Midnight's body dangled from the ceiling, forcing her to stand permanently with her weight uncomfortably supported on the tips of her toes. Metal shackles were also wrapped around her ankles and tails, further restricting her movements. The room was empty except for the man in the chair, and the smell of old blood pervaded the air, with a few bloody spots staining the floors. Another obvious intimidation attempt. Midnight had to restrain herself from laughing despite her situation. And so it begins, Midnight thought to herself before the man spoke up. Who are you? The man asked, his voice gruff and monotone, only to be met with complete silence. Midnight just stood there staring at him, clearly uninterested in answering his question. Before writing something on his clipboard, the man made a note of it. How did you get here? There is more silence. Are there others like you? Do you have any ties to Naruto Uzumaki, the demon carrier? Midnight didn't even respond when she heard her love's name. Each question he posed was met with a few scribbles on his clipboard. He asked her a few more questions and received the same response. There is complete silence. A group of observers stood behind the room's single large one-way mirror. One of the observers was Kakashi. His mask and headband concealed it, but the man was shaken by the fight, replaying it in his mind over and over. She managed to deflect my Chidori even though her body was completely immobile. Kakashi reflected on his earlier strike. From behind, he aimed his Chidori at Midnight's heart, but she was able to create a thin barrier of protective chakra around her torso and head, which Kakashi's Chidori crashed into but could not penetrate. Instead, he had to slide his Chidori down her body and attack her tails, slicing through one but only gashing the other due to the strength of the muscles. Kakashi even remembered Guy's attack. The lotus hidden. He remembered seeing Midnight's chakra form right where Guy's strikes landed with his sharing an eye. The red chakra not only reduced the damage from the initial strike, but it also served as a cushion, breaking Midnight's fall when she collided with the ground. The girl was found unconscious but still alive. Everyone could see that Midnight was a woman now, something they couldn't be certain of during the fight. It wasn't something that was particularly on anyone's mind at the time. But now that the fox demon had been captured, the girl's features were clearly visible. Midnight usually dressed in traditional shinobi garb. Cargo pants, a fishnet shirt, and a sports bra complete the look. Her clothes, however, were heavily ripped. Because they were so shredded, they had to be removed. As she sat in that interrogation room, the girl was only wearing a pair of black slacks and a sports bra. The adolescent demon wasn't fully grown, but her wide hips, developing breasts, and, of course, the lack of a bulge in her pantyhose told the story. Not to mention her incredible, knee-length hair. However, Kakashi's gaze was elsewhere. His attention was now drawn to the two furry appendages sprouting from the girl's tailbone. Kakashi had severed one of her tails near the base and heavily gashed the other to the point of amputation. But both of her tails had grown back fully. In fact, despite being bruised and beaten just hours before, the girl's body showed no signs of having been in a serious fight in which she sustained major injuries. The third Hokage sat by Kakashi's side, smoking a pipe and surveying the scene. He was especially curious about Kakashi's reaction. Sarutobi could tell the man had been shaken by the experience. "What's on your mind, Kakashi?" the old man inquired, his gaze drawn to the masked shinobi from the corner of his eye. "Thinking about the fight. This thing, her strength is monstrous," said Kakashi solemnly. Sarutobi gave a nod. "From our reports, she showed up during Naruto's attack," Sarutobi stated matter-of-factly, drawing Kakashi's full attention. "Are you saying the demon appeared to defend her?" Kakashi inquired. Sarutobi clarified. Kakashi arched his brow. Given the boy's effeminate appearance, it was understandable for the shinobi to mistake Naruto for a girl. But Sarutobi was one of the few people who truly knew Naruto. He thought he did, at least. "We can't know anything right now. Hopefully Ibiki can find out the truth. I'll check on Naruto," the old man said as he turned to exit the room through a metal door. Kakashi nodded in agreement, returning his attention to the interrogation. Ibiki had arrived in front of Midnight. Ibiki towered over the girl and gave her a blank stare. Midnight returned the stare with her own. They had made no progress. "This is how it's going to work. I ask questions. You answer," the man stated clearly as the room door opened. A masked man with a briefcase entered. The man handed the briefcase to Ibiki before bowing and walking away, not making eye contact with Midnight. Despite the man's presence, Midnight kept her demonic gaze on Ibiki, craning her neck back slightly to look up at him. Ibiki turned around, laying the suitcase across the chair he had previously occupied and opening it. The case was filled with a slew of different sharp objects. Knives, needles, kunai, and other torture instruments. Ibiki turned around to face Midnight after inspecting the contents, leaving the suitcase open so she could see what was inside. Ibiki took note of her complete lack of reaction. He then put one hand into a kanji and whispered coldly, "Torture chamber, summoning art." A cage appeared around the two as he whispered this. As more metal chains engulfed Midnight's form and squeezed tightly on her body, metal bars formed a box around her. Her entire body was pinned to the cage's walls. Special gears outside the cage began to turn, causing the chains to twist and constrict tighter around the girl's body. Midnight had to grit her teeth to stop herself from letting out any sounds of pain. As the chains tightened, Ibiki began to walk forward. "This is your home now," he whispered hauntingly while raising his hand above her head, the man holding a surgical knife. Midnight stared straight into his eyes, the girl unmoving, unflinching. "So be it." A while later, a long ways away, thick lashes fluttered open to reveal dull blue eyes. Naruto's vision was blurry, the boy taking time to raise one dainty hand to wipe away his grogginess. As he did, the effeminate boy noticed a number of figures hovering over him. What's on? Where am I?" Naruto asked in a concerned voice while trying to sit up. As he did so, a gentle hand was placed against his forehead, carefully pushing his head back down onto a pillow. "Calm down, sweetie. You're in the hospital," came a familiar voice. Naruto looked up to see Kurenai standing next to the bed he occupied. Naruto laid in a hospital bed covered in sheets. The sun was shining through a nearby window. It was the next day. Naruto had been passed out all night. The room was rather full. There was a doctor standing next to Kurenai already inspecting Naruto. Near the walls to the room a number of shinobi stood as well. Finally, on the opposite side of the bed relative to Kurenai, Iruka stood. He looked down upon Naruto with worry evident on his brow. "Naruto, you're finally awake," Iruka stated in relief. Naruto was a bit overwhelmed by the situation, especially as a bright light was shined into his eyes. In his human form, Naruto's eyes responded like normal even though his demonic eyes were essentially immune to bright lights. "She seems healthy. Or rather, he." The doctor trailed off while his eyes trailed down Naruto's body to settle on the spot between Naruto's legs. Instinctively, Naruto squeezed his thighs together and turned his face away from the doctor. Kurenai narrowed her gaze at the doctor. "Are you quite finished?" the woman asked in an agitated voice. The man nodded his head, clearing his throat a bit before walking off. "Yes, physically the boy is fine. I don't know how, given the subject's state upon first entering the ward. However, given what he has witnessed, I would recommend therapy," the doctor said before leaving the room, closing the door behind him. Kurenai nodded in understanding before focusing back on Naruto. Naruto at this point had pulled the bed sheets halfway over his face, trying to hide behind them. His knuckles were white as he held the fabric tightly, his small hands shaking. Iruka moved a hand down to place over Naruto's, giving Naruto an affectionate squeeze. "Everything is going to be okay, Naruto," Iruka spoke in a soothing voice. This was something Naruto rarely heard from the man. The concern was evident on the Iruka's face. He was gentle, more gentle than he'd ever been. Iruka was always kind to Naruto, but this was different. Seeing Naruto like this, so vulnerable, set off a protective, nurturing instinct within the Chunin. A lot of it had to do with Naruto's current appearance. This was the first time Iruka had seen Naruto in this form without Naruto casting a henge jutsu to hide his features while at school. Honestly, at first when Iruka saw Naruto laying in the hospital bed, he thought there was some mistake, immediately thinking Naruto to be a different person altogether. A blonde-haired girl. He had to check with the nearby nurse to confirm. But this was Naruto, the real Naruto. To say that Iruka was surprised was an understatement. Iruka didn't find out about Naruto's state until the following day. Luckily, he hadn't seen Naruto all covered in blood, otherwise the man might have had a heart attack. Seeing Naruto this way, well, it changed his perception altogether. The gentleness in which Iruka held Naruto's hand served to slightly calm the boy. Naruto lowered the sheet, placing it around his belly. He noticed that he was wearing pink girl's pajamas, clearly not standard for the hospital. Naruto looked down in confusion. Kurenai smiled warmly while reaching down to clasp Naruto's other hand, giving it a small squeeze. "I brought it myself. Thought you might like it more than some ugly hospital gown," Kurenai whispered softly. Naruto stared up at her with a mixed expression, unsure why they were being so nice. He could tell that the gown Kurenai had got him was a girl's, but he didn't mind. It was just nice to receive a gift. "Thank you," he whispered in a quiet, barely audible high-pitched voice. Naruto's voice was even more soft than normal. Iruka's brow furrowed slightly when hearing Naruto's true voice. It was so different than the voice of a dope that he'd gotten used to all these years. Hearing how vulnerable Naruto sounded, it nearly broke his heart. This was compounded by the softness and frailness of Naruto's hand. Could this really be his Naruto? "Naruto, what happened?" Iruka asked in concern, drawing Kurenai's narrowed glance. Naruto's eyes widened, flashes of the previous day flooding his mind. Almost instantly, tears began to well up in his already puffy orbs. He had been crying in his sleep. Kurenai tentatively moved her free hand down to gently caress the side of Naruto's face. He flinched at first but soon relaxed under her touch. "That can wait until later," the woman stated sternly towards Iruka. "I'm afraid it can't," came a voice off to the side. That voice came from the third Hokage himself. Sarutobi entered the room with a small entourage of shinobi, one being Guy, who had bandage wrapped around both his legs. Upon seeing the third Hokage, Kurenai bowed her head, though she didn't pull away from Naruto. Neither did Iruka. This was contrasted by the fact that the other shinobi in the room performed a full bow at the waist in the Hokage's presence. Sarutobi walked to the side of the bed to hover over Naruto, the boy watching him with a wary, worried gaze. "May we have the room?" Sarutobi asked, though of course it was less of a request and more of a command coming from the third Hokage's mouth. Both Kurenai and Iruka were conflicted, but neither disobeyed. They pulled away from Naruto and moved to exit the room. Iruka gave Naruto's hand one final squeeze before departing. Similarly, Kurenai did the exact same thing. Both of their nurturing instincts triggered by Naruto's apparent helplessness. Being separated from their caring presence was clearly distressing to the boy, something that Sarutobi picked up on. "Wait," Sarutobi called out, causing everyone in the room to stop. "Kurenai, Iruka, you may stay." the old man stated, which caused a look of surprise to show on their face. They both nodded before quickly returning to Naruto's side and picking his delicate hand back up. Kurenai cradled one of Naruto's hands in both of hers. Iruka mimicked her. Sarutobi could see the obvious calming effect this had on Naruto, something which may make the upcoming questions easier. After a moment, the only ones left in the room were Sarutobi, Kurenai, Iruka, Guy, and Naruto. Guy was standing a little ways away, observing from afar. Sarutobi chose his words carefully. I need you to answer me honestly. Tell me exactly what happened, Sarutobi stated sternly. The command made Naruto freeze. Calm down, sweetheart, rang Kyuubi's voice in Naruto's head. Mother, I don't know, I can't. Midnight. The boy sputtered in distress. Almost immediately, tears began pouring down his cheeks. He could barely speak even through his mind link, let alone out loud. Iruka was the most alarmed out of the group. He'd never seen Naruto cry before. Please calm down, Naruto. This is very important. Sarutobi spoke in a soft whisper. I need you to tell me what happened. Every detail you can remember. The Hokage continued to press, thinking about the events of the other day, thinking about the fact that he still couldn't hear Midnight. It was too much. Naruto opened his mouth to speak but was soon overwhelmed by a sea of tears pouring down his face. He pulled both his hands away from Iruka and Kurenai and began bawling uncontrollably. In alarm, Kurenai leaned forward over Naruto, looking up to Sarutobi with a narrowed glance. Can't you see he isn't ready for this? This isn't going to work, Kurenai insisted in a protective manner. Iruka looked on in shock that Kurenai was speaking so defiantly towards the third Hokage directly to his face. Sarutobi was a bit surprised, taking his time to think things over. Guy finally moved forward to place a hand along Kurenai's shoulder. This is important, Kurenai, the man stated seriously. This drew a glare from the woman. Don't you think I know that? I was there too. I saw what that thing did. Still, this isn't helping. You got my report. That should be enough for now, she insisted, causing Guy to back down and remove his hand from Kurenai's shoulder. Kurenai hadn't seen anything that he himself hadn't seen. Sarutobi thought over the whole situation. They knew very little about what transpired before the demons showed up. The villagers who were in a condition to answer questions gave very few details. From what they gathered, the villagers attacked Naruto, and the self-proclaimed demon appeared in apparent defense of Naruto. The villagers didn't want to incriminate themselves. Most of them, having been dismembered in some way, didn't want to add more problems to their lives. He'd tried to talk to Hinata as well and had gotten even less out of her. It seems she was in shock and was completely unable to answer any questions at all. She'd been taken back to the Hyuga compound for treatment. What Sarutobi really wanted to gather was whether or not this was intentional. Did Naruto summon this thing? Did the Kyuubi? Would something like it appear again were Naruto to be attacked or put in danger? So many unknowns. Regardless, it seems he wasn't going to get answers today. Not unless Ibiki had more luck on his side. After a moment of contemplation, Sarutobi let out a soft sigh in defeat. Okay, Sarutobi commented shortly before nodding at Guy. He then looked down one last time towards Naruto. I'm sorry to have caused you distress. Please focus on healing. Take all the time you need. We'll place guards with you at all times until further notice for your own protection. We won't let this happen again, Naruto. You have my word, Sarutobi stated resolutely before moving to exit the room. Naruto stayed silent as the two men left, watching them with a conflicted gaze. It's okay, sweetie. Don't push yourself. When is the last time you've eaten? You've been unconscious for an entire day, you know. Kurenai went on, causing a shocked expression across Naruto's face. An entire day. So this isn't the next morning, this is the morning after that. What's happened to Midnight? Naruto thought to himself in a panic. Kurenai frowned as she saw the distress in his face. You must be hungry. I'll go make sure we get you a good meal. You need to eat, the woman insisted while standing up fully, giving Naruto's hand a squeeze before departing to find Naruto a meal, leaving the boy alone with Iruka. Iruka was a lot more lost, staring down at Naruto, not quite knowing what to do or what to say. Naruto seemed lost in his thoughts. Midnight, is she okay, Naruto? Kyuubi spoke out hesitantly. Naruto picked up on that immediately. Then why can't I speak to her? She still won't answer me. Naruto cried out in alarm through their demonic link. She isn't in a position to speak, Kyuubi explained cryptically. Naruto began to tremble. Why not? Why can't I see her? Mother, please let me see her. Tell her to let me see. Naruto pleaded desperately. Midnight was intentionally blocking her connection to Naruto, otherwise he would be able to see the condition that she was in. Kyuubi was silent for a time. Mommy, Naruto asked again. She doesn't want you to see her right now. Kyuubi continued to be vague. But why? Naruto pressed. These are questions you don't want the answer to, Naruto. Hearing that caused Naruto to freeze, his imagination running wild. He was shaking uncontrollably now. Iruka was beyond distressed, calling out to Naruto, but Naruto would not respond. This is all my fault. She is suffering because of me. She is in so much pain she can't even bear speaking to me or letting me see her. Naruto whispered solemnly to himself. Kyuubi stayed silent, all but confirming Naruto's suspicions. We have to save her. Mommy, please save her. Naruto cried out desperately. Kyuubi took her time before speaking. I can't, sweetheart. The consequences would be too high. The woman explained. Naruto was dumbfounded. What consequences? Why can't you save her? I'll do anything. I just need to see her again. The boy went on. It was all he could do to control his outward reaction, managing to contain this conversation to his link. Would you murder? Kyuubi questioned hauntingly, causing Naruto to freeze. In order for us to free her, we'd have to kill a lot of people. Murder them in cold blood. Fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, sons, daughters. Are you prepared to take the life of the innocent just to see her face again? Are you prepared to be hated by every single human? Kyuubi finally asked that important question. Naruto was taken aback, his mind freezing. Everyone, Naruto whispered. Everyone but your family. Everyone. That's what it will take to free her. Are you ready to become that? Kyuubi asked seriously. Naruto didn't answer as Kyuubi expected. If not, then you know why I can't free her. It's up to her to escape. Trust her, Naruto. It may take her some time, but she will escape. Though I can't promise that she will be exactly the same when she does, or that it will be any time soon. Kyuubi stated bluntly. The dread that Naruto was feeling was overwhelming. He couldn't handle it. It was too much. On the outside, Iruka and Kurenai were both hovering over Naruto. In the time it took to have that conversation, she had returned with a plate of breakfast only to find Iruka trying and failing to calm down a hysterical Naruto who was bawling his eyes out. They were both now trying desperately to calm him down. They weren't making much progress. Motherfucking ugh. Midnight screamed inwardly as another sharp needle pierced her flesh. Who are you? A cold voice asked. In response to Midnight's silence, Ibiki shoved a blade deep into Midnight's tail, a pool of blood leaking from the appendage. How did you get here? More silence, causing Ibiki to take another needle, this time stabbing it into her chest and puncturing her lung. You're unique, clearly able to endure much more pain than any human. Your healing is remarkable. It opens up so much more potential. Time for a lunch break, Ibiki stated emotionlessly, keeping the needle lodged in Midnight's chest so her every breath was a struggle. As he left the torture cage, Midnight dropped her head. She had been staring him in the eyes the entire time, but these breaks gave her time to rest. She was covered in needles, blood staining her fur. One of her tails was cut in half, already healing back. Kyuubi appeared in her ghostly, incorporeal form in front of Midnight, the woman standing upright with her hands resting regally against her own belly. Kyuubi walked forward and placed a gentle hand against Midnight's cheek. The contact caused Midnight to lean desperately into that touch, the only comfort she received in this place. I'm sorry, Midnight. Kyuubi spoke out softly. Midnight kept her eyes down, still wheezing heavily. Don't be. I chose this. Midnight responded back in a monotone. Kyuubi took on a solemn gaze, but Midnight finally looked up. Kyuubi could see how weary the girl's eyes were. Ibiki hadn't let her sleep. I can handle it, Midnight insisted before dropping her head. Kyuubi frowned before leaning forward to plant a gentle kiss against the girl's forehead. Midnight's weakened state limited their connection. Kyuubi wasn't truly there. Her presence was like a phantom. She could only interact with Midnight in short bursts. Midnight's chakra was suppressed by the chains, though even at her weakest the connection was never really severed. A demon's connection was a force of nature. Kyuubi stood up before turning her back on Midnight, turning around to see Ibiki returning with a bowl of ramen. He sat down in the chair casually, unfazed by the sight of Midnight's broken form as he ate. He of course couldn't see Kyuubi in her phantom state. Kyuubi committed his face to memory before disappearing from the room to return to her cage. Returning to that cliff, the woman looked out on the sea. An image of Naruto appeared in the sea like a movie. Iruka and Kurenai had managed to calm him down. Kurenai had climbed in bed with him and was currently cuddling the boy to her breast. Kyuubi watched idly, the woman closing her eyes in order to suck in air and let out a calming breath. As Naruto was cradled against Kurenai's breasts, the ghostly form of Kyuubi appeared on the opposite side of Naruto. Naruto turned his head to see her, feeling as Kyuubi's arms wrapped around his skinny waist. She pressed her body into him from behind, spooning him. Iruka, sitting next to Naruto's bed, had hand resting along Naruto's ankle. Kyubai's ghostly legs began to entwine with Naruto's, Iruka's hand passing through Kyubai's intangible body. Naruto let out a soft breath before closing his eyes. This time he appeared within Kyubai's cage, both of them laying across a grassy field. In the real world, Naruto was curled up to Kurenai in the same way that he was curled up to his mother in that cage, face buried within their breasts. After a while the boy finally fell asleep. Kyubai watched him for a time before dozing off with him. The coming days would be a trial. 2 weeks later, dull blue eyes stared into a mirror, the boy's expression solemn, to put it mildly. Naruto was in his dobe form, his henge in place, changing nearly everything about his appearance, all except his voice. Naruto was barely able to imitate his mother's dobe voice by this point. It required a lot of concentration and was nearly impossible in his current mental state. Naruto hadn't said much in the last week. He'd been staring into the mirror for hours, trying to stretch his usual cocky, bright, and cheery smile across his chapped lips. He couldn't make a smile no matter how hard he tried. Only a sad imitation would creep onto the boy's face. It was probably better to not smile at all than to put on such a show. Seeing his own pitiful expression made him want to cry. But he had been trying not to because it had been all he could do recently. Naruto had spent so much time in the mirror because today was his first day back at school. Because of the attack at the festival, school was closed for a longer period of time than usual following the holidays. As word of the incident spread, the entire village was in a state of panic. Everyone was on edge because they thought the attack had been carried out by another village. Many parents kept their children at home, so school was cancelled until things calmed down. Even so, school was only out for a week and only recently resumed. Despite this, Naruto did not attend. He was too ill to be around his peers' normal daily lives. Even today, he didn't think he was ready, but Kurenai and Iruka, who had become surrogate parents to him in recent weeks, insisted he try to get back to normal. So today is Naruto's first day back. Naruto hadn't seen any of his friends in 2 weeks. Because Naruto was essentially under house arrest, Sasuke and Hinata found it difficult to see him. Though this was not due to a lack of effort on their part. As Naruto continued to try to smile, a pair of arms carefully wrapped around his waist, squishing the fabric of his orange jumpsuit. "You should really eat something before school, sweetheart," Naruto's mother said softly as she squeezed his malnourished body from behind. Naruto crossed his hands over his mother's and stared straight ahead. "I'm not hungry," he managed to say through the link. He didn't dare to speak out loud for fear of making a pathetic noise. When Kyubai heard his response, she turned the boy around to face her. She then cupped both sides of his face with her hands. "You have to eat something. A growing boy needs nourishment," Kyubai insisted. Naruto lowered his gaze, wrapping his scrawny arms around his own empty stomach. "Demons can go months without food," he replied solemnly. Naruto hadn't eaten in nearly a week. Kyubai shook her head before taking a step back and dropping the top to the toilet so she could sit down. She sat down and drew Naruto up onto her lap, the boy now straddling her thighs. "You are still half human, and you can't live as long as a full demon," she continued. Naruto flinched visibly at this realization. "I wish I was," he said, his face scrunching up. The subject was clearly upsetting him. The boy, on the other hand, did not cry this time. His body wouldn't let him. Kyubai watched him closely before reaching off to the side to turn on the sink faucet. She let water pool in her hand before placing her furry palm against his lips. "We can only play with the cards we've been dealt, sweetheart. Drink something. You shouldn't be doing this to yourself," Kyubai lectured, pressing her palm against his lips. Naruto turned away. "I can't. If I drink anything, I'll cry in front of them. I can't control it. It just won't stop coming." His eyes scrunched up again in distress. He'd be crying now if he wasn't so dehydrated. "Please drink something, Naruto-kun," a weak voice said through the demonic link. Naruto's eyes widened. "Midnight, how are you?" Naruto exclaimed quickly. There was a long pause before Midnight responded again. "I'm fine, Naruto-kun. Please drink," she pleaded again. Naruto could tell how frail she was just by hearing her voice. "Okay, Midnight. Anything for you. Please don't leave," Naruto said in a panic, leaning forward to desperately sip from Kyubai's hand. "Thank you, Naruto-kun." The girl's voice faded away, unable to finish her sentence before disappearing completely. "Midnight, midnight," yelled Naruto, only to be met with silence. As soon as Naruto finished gulping down the water Kyubai had in her hand, tears welled up in his eyes. He began to shake uncontrollably. Kyubai stood there silently, pouring another pool of water into her hand and pressing her palm against Naruto's lips, the boy now willingly drinking. Midnight had been able to establish her connection with Naruto for the past few days, but only for a few moments each day. Midnight sounded extremely weak every time they spoke. Her voice would often fade away at the end of the conversation. She still wouldn't let Naruto see her, and he knew why. His mother wouldn't say anything, but he knew. They were torturing her and he couldn't do anything to stop it. He still had to pretend he didn't know her, that he didn't know anything about the black-furred demon who came to his aid during the festival. He had to in order to protect her, knowing she was still alive but being unable to feel her, touch her, or feel her arms wrap around his body was almost as bad as if he'd lost her that day. He couldn't stop thinking about her. He barely slept, ate, drank, and spoke. Naruto needed her and couldn't function without her. Later, Naruto walked through the streets of Konoha early this morning, wanting to get to class early so he wouldn't draw attention to himself. A man followed inconspicuously behind a distance away. He dressed normally, but Naruto recognized him as the shinobi assigned to be Naruto's personal guard, or, more precisely, to watch Naruto and ensure that another incident does not occur. These watchmen were more like parole officers than true guardians, and they did nothing to stop any villager who saw Naruto. Naruto didn't think he could take any more stairs, so he took the long route with the fewest people. Eventually, he'd start traveling by rooftop. He just didn't want to be seen today. But he had to be careful not to move too quickly or he'd alarm his bodyguard. Kyuubi decided to pay Naruto her daily visit while he was on his way to school. Midnight lay on her back on a stone table in a dark dungeon room. The jagged edges of the table dug into the girl's flesh, but that wasn't even close to the worst thing Midnight was going through. Kyuubi's ghostly form appeared in the room just as a blade pierced Midnight's flesh. The girl was laying down, arms and legs outstretched like a starfish, cold metal shackles digging into her wrists. A large open wound in her belly, a man bending over her with a surgical knife. He wore a full surgical outfit while exploring Midnight's insides while she was still awake. Ibiki stood on the opposite side of the table, arms folded. It's quite fascinating. Despite multiple weeks without food or water, her muscles show little signs of deterioration, and I predict she could survive for months without either, the surgeon said before making another incision and scanning a different section of the girl's insides. Midnight stared up at the ceiling, twitching and convulsing with a distant look on her face. She didn't make a sound on the outside, but inside her head was a different story. Oh fuck, Midnight yelled through the demonic link. From the side, Kyuubi approached the table, looking down on the action. The girl's body was grotesquely mutilated in a variety of ways. Kyuubi, on the other hand, ignored this, focusing on Midnight's pained expression. She reached a ghostly hand down to caress the black-furred fox's face. Midnight, please stop, this has gone too far. Kyuubi spoke quietly, not that she needed to because her presence couldn't be detected by anyone except those who could experience the demonic link. Midnight didn't respond right away, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. You say that every day. You already know my answer, GHHH. The girl said through the link as her back arched from the pain of another incision, drawing the attention of the surgeon, who looked at her face. It is unknown whether this is due to a strong will or the subject's perception of pain is less profound than a human's. The surgeon said, more to himself. There was a recording device nearby. Trust me, she can feel this just like anyone else. Her body is simply more durable. I'd say it's a double-edged sword because that extreme durability is combined with near-identical pain sensitivity to humans, Ibiki commented, prompting the surgeon to nod. Kyuubi's eyes narrowed as the two men spoke casually, as if they weren't putting Midnight through excruciating, inhuman amounts of pain. We can find another way, dear. This is too extreme, and I know you could have escaped days ago, Kyuubi persisted. This is the most efficient way, Midnight retorted quietly and strainedly. Kyuubi locked his gaze on her for a few moments. The woman's eyes widened as she realized what was going on. This was a new expression on Kyuubi's normally calm face. You're not just doing this to cure Naruto's sensitivity to human judgment, Kyuubi said, as the women began to make connections. She then looked at Midnight in disbelief. How far ahead have you planned? Midnight slowly turned her head to look Kyuubi in the eyes in response to Kyuubi's question. To Kyuubi's surprise, a devilish grin appeared across Midnight's fox-like muzzle. Kyuubi was taken aback. You truly are amazing, Midnight. I can't say I approve of your methods, but please be careful, Kyuubi said tenderly, caressing Midnight's face once more. Of course, Caillou-chan, Midnight said quietly, arching her back as another sharp pain shot up her spine. Ibiki poked a pencil into Midnight's right eye. Her smirk irritated him. Kyuubi was forced back into her cage after being disconnected from her connection to Midnight. She stood in the middle of that familiar grassy field, her hand, which had been outstretched to caress Midnight, now returning to an elegant position against her pelvis. Oh Midnight, Kyuubi said solemnly before kneeling in the grass with her hands gracefully placed atop her own lap. I beg your pardon, my children. Naruto, for example. Naruto was the first to arrive at class, just as he had planned. Naruto sat in the farthest corner possible, rather than near the center of the room. This position alone was a far cry from what the dobe would choose. The dobe would want to be in the spotlight, drawing as much attention to himself as possible. After a few moments, the first student entered. Hinata. When he saw her, a pit formed in Naruto's stomach. He wasn't ready. Hinata moved to her usual seat, right next to Naruto. Of course, she didn't want to be the center of attention, she just wanted to be next to him. Her face was gloomy as she walked up the stairs of the auditorium-style room. Hinata's eyes widened as she approached her aisle and noticed the silhouette of a lone figure sitting in the back corner. Naruto. Hinata paused for a brief moment, fidgeting with her fingers. Even from this distance, she could tell that something wasn't quite right. He was averting his gaze from her. She took slow steps towards Naruto until she was standing at the end of his aisle. "Hello, Naru-kun," she said cautiously. Naruto didn't respond right away, keeping his head turned away from her. His slender fingers were tightly gripping the baggy fabric of his pants. "What will she think when she sees me like this?" panicked Naruto. Hinata waited patiently, fidgeting. "I have missed you, Naru-kun," she said again, hesitantly. Naruto finally responded, turning his head to look up at her. Seeing his face, his eyes broke her heart. "Oh, Naruto," she whimpered before leaping into the aisle and wrapping her arms around his neck, embracing him in a tight hug. Naruto froze, trying to calm himself. "Hinata-chan," Naruto said quietly. Hinata drew back to examine his face. Hinata could hardly stand it. She rubbed his cheek, biting her bottom lip. She had no idea what to do. What could she do? She could tell he was becoming more agitated by the situation. "It's okay, Naru-kun," she said as she kissed his forehead and sat down next to him. She squished her hip into his and gently squeezed one of his hands. Naruto finally turned away, raising his free hand to cover his mouth. He was struggling, but the boy was able to fight back tears. "It's okay, it's Hinata," continued to whisper. She stayed by his side, attempting to be his rock. Hinata understood, as much as she could after what he went through. Still, she didn't know the half of it. After a while, other students began to arrive, their spirits much brighter. It was just another ordinary day for them. No one noticed Naruto and Hinata in the corner of the room, not even Sasuke as he entered with his hands tucked into his pockets, drawing the admiration and swooning of the girls in the room. In Naruto's eyes, he appeared especially agitated. Naruto could see the boy's fists clenched in his pockets. Finally, Iruka and Mizuki entered the room through the doorway to the office, which connected directly to the room, as opposed to everyone else, who entered through the door connected to the school hallway. He was holding a clipboard and collecting papers from the nearby teacher's desk. Iruka began calling rolls after the bell rang. "Choji, here, Ino, present." "Naruto," Iruka said, only to be met with silence. Sasuke clenched his teeth. Naruto's absence had been one of the most discussed topics in the previous week. Iruka refused to explain herself. Nobody seemed to know anything. Some speculated that he had passed away. Here, a quiet, shaky, high-pitched voice called out to fill the otherwise empty air. Almost immediately, everyone's head swiveled to the far corner, a shocked expression on the majority of their faces. Naruto raised a trembling hand, his gaze averted from the peering eyes of his classmates. His posture was all wrong, meek, not the confident visage of his usual doby self. On his brow was a rare expression of surprise and confusion. What the hell happened to him? What is going on? Sasuke pondered. Despite growing closer to Naruto in recent months, Sasuke was instructed to keep his distance from Naruto in class, to treat him as he did before the reveal, rather than as the powerhouse he knew Naruto to be. "It's good to have you back, Naruto," Iruka said, smiling. Naruto nodded slowly and dropped his hand, acknowledging but still unable to look anyone in the eyes. Iruka continued the roll call, but most eyes were still on Naruto. Sakura, Iruka said twice, making the girl swivel her head around to look at the Chunin. "Oh, sorry." Here, she apologized before returning her gaze to Naruto. What happened to him? Sakura wondered, fixated on Naruto's meek appearance. Her thoughts were similar to those of nearly everyone else in class. "Class," Iruka exclaimed, drawing everyone's attention to her. His expression was unusually angry. "You will give me your undivided attention, understand?" the Chunin demanded. To be honest, his tone confused everyone. "Yes, sensei." They all agreed. Iruka nodded in satisfaction as she continued with the class as usual. Despite Iruka's assertiveness, many glances were cast in Naruto's direction throughout the lesson. When the class took its first break, Naruto remained inside while everyone else left. Sasuke decided to leave with the others after seeing Hinata tending to the blonde. Naruto was the most discussed topic in the yard. "Dude, did you see him?" He's like a little mouse. What do you think happened? Kiba inquired, sitting near his crew. Beats me. Something serious clearly, Shikamaru replied half-heartedly. Was he always that skinny? Choji wondered as he stuffed a potato chip into his mouth. Something is definitely wrong, Shino said cryptically. A similar discussion was taking place in another group, this time with girls. I've never seen Naruto so sad, Sakura expressed concern. Yeah, it's kind of freaking me out, Ino replied. The gossiping continued until the break bell rang. Everyone returned to class to find Naruto and Hinata still in the same spot. They couldn't stop staring. Hurry back to your seats now, Iruka said, grabbing everyone's attention once more. He'd left Naruto in the care of Hinata. Keeping an eye on Naruto with Kurenai for the past few weeks had taught him a lot. His goal for today was to make things as normal as possible. Alright, I hope you remember the tests you took before the break. They are fully graded, but we are going to have a refresher, Iruka said, causing a series of groans. This was the most boring part of class. The refresher usually consisted of Iruka reading aloud and giving the class the opportunity to ask questions. He'd usually summon people at random to read or answer a question to test their knowledge. Naruto, you had the lowest grade on the exam. I want to make sure you're getting the material. Please come to the front, Iruka said, causing all heads to swivel back to Naruto. The blonde-haired boy felt a surge of dread. This was quite common. He'd usually get the lowest grade on all tests and quizzes and then be called forward to read at least one incorrect answer and the correct answer out loud. Naruto didn't move right away, his eyes widening as he looked pleadingly at Iruka. Iruka was well aware of Naruto's condition, but she truly believed that this was in the best interests of the boy. It had been over 2 weeks. Normalcy had to begin somewhere. Please Naruto, Iruka said softly this time, gesturing to the spot right next to where Iruka stood. Hinata squeezed Naruto's hand gently and reassuringly. They didn't appear to be of much assistance. Naruto slowly stood up and walked past Hinata to the outside of the aisle, realizing he wasn't getting out of this. As he walked to the front, there was complete silence. Naruto bowed his head, his sleeved arms wrapped around his belly, and his shoulders hunched. Sakura mumbled to herself. Off to the side, Sasuke clenched his teeth. What the hell? The boy's emotions were more akin to rage than pity. Who the hell did this to him? Naruto came to a halt in front of the class, turning to face them. Iruka handed the boy a sheet of paper as he did so. We'll just do the first question. What is the proper medical treatment for someone who has broken their ankle on the field? Iruka asked, looking down expectantly at Naruto. The answer was written on the paper. He only had to read it. The ruffling of the paper Naruto held could be heard as his dainty hands trembled in the silence of the room. After a brief moment, small watery drops began to stain the page. The proper treatment, Naruto whimpered, his high-pitched voice cracking. He was attempting to put on that cocky smile but failing miserably. Ino covered her mouth with both hands, tears welling up in her eyes. The majority of the girls in the room gave similar responses. Iruka, unable to bear it any longer, took the page from Naruto before placing a hand on the back of Naruto's head and allowing Naruto to lean his forehead against Iruka's chest. Naruto then sobbed uncontrollably into Iruka's vest in front of everyone. Many others had collapsed by this point. Naruto, Iruka-sensei, what happened? Sakura cried out, wiping tears from her eyes with her forearms. Dude, you alright? Kiba asked, clearly concerned about the boy. I'm sorry, Naruto said quietly. Hearing his voice did little to calm anyone down. It only made matters worse. Iruka stepped back a little, kneeling in front of Naruto. Naruto, drop the henge. It's okay. It's time, Iruka said, causing a fearful, conflicted expression to cross Naruto's face. The boy shook his head, looking to the side to see who was staring at him before quickly shifting his gaze away in shame. It's okay. There's no need to keep up the facade. Not anymore, Iruka said softly, staring into Naruto's dull blue eyes. Naruto hesitated for a long time before finally succumbing. He slowly nodded his head before being surrounded by a large cloud of smoke. When the smoke cleared, a series of gasps echoed throughout the room. The person in front of them was nothing like Naruto. Naruto's hair was no longer spiky and unkempt. Instead, his silky blonde locks flowed down to his calves. His face was much more feminine, more rounded, with much softer and delicate features. He could have been even slimmer. The top half of that orange jumpsuit was hanging off his shoulders, appearing to be several sizes too big. The jumpsuit's sleeves now covered his hands and hung past his fingers. When Naruto raised his arms to wipe away his tears, the sleeves of his jumpsuit fell back, revealing how scrawny and feminine his arms and hands were. Is that Naruto? What the hell is going on? Hiba exclaimed, his stunned voice filling the empty air. Yes, this is Naruto. The real Naruto, Iruka said, standing up and gently placing a hand on Naruto's shoulder. The effeminate tween wrapped his arms around himself once more, turning his head away from the class. Naruto, I'd like you to go home for the day, but I need you back here on time tomorrow, understand? Iruka said. Without looking up, Naruto nodded and dashed out of the room. The expressions on everyone's faces said it all. Listen up, everyone, Iruka said, drawing everyone's attention. Except for Sasuke and Hinata, everyone else was dumbfounded. Naruto lost someone very close to him during the attack that happened at the anniversary 2 weeks ago, Iruka explained. The students' faces were filled with a sense of realization. You will treat Naruto with respect. Taking care of a damaged ally is one of the top measures of a true shinobi, Iruka lectured. He could see that what he explained was too much for them to process. For today, class is dismissed. When you return tomorrow, I expect you to treat Naruto as you would any of your other classmates. Dismissed, Iruka said. Almost immediately, they began to gossip and chatter with only one topic on everyone's mind. Hinata rose and made her way down the aisle after most of the guests had left. She left the room on her own, walking down the hall and towards the Hyuga compound. What do you know about this? Asked a voice from behind her. Hinata turned around to see Sasuke's solemn expression. The events of today are clearly having a strong impact on him. I can't say, Hinata said quietly, causing Sasuke's eyes to narrow. But you do know, Sasuke said accusingly. Hinata considered her response as she stared at Sasuke. She and Sasuke had also grown close in recent months. At least they weren't strangers. They both had a vested interest in Naruto's well-being, not to mention that they were frequent sparring partners. Some would even say they were friends, though that was debatable. If you are meant to know, Naruto will tell you directly, Hinata stated firmly before turning her back on Sasuke and walking away. To her surprise, Sasuke grabbed her wrist and stopped her in her tracks. The boy's teeth gritted as she turned her head to stare at him. They exchanged a silent stare for a few moments before Sasuke let go of her. Hinata's gaze lingered on him for a moment with an understanding expression before she continued on her way. Before vanishing from view, Sasuke kept his fists balled. Two figures sat at a table, chess in hand. Both were dressed in full shinobi uniforms, with the distinctive Leaf Village headband covering their brows. One of them stared at the board for a long time before turning to the side to see an approaching figure, a black-haired woman with red eyes. Oi Kurenai, is it that late already? The man asked, looking up at the sky. He'd been so engrossed in the game that he hadn't even noticed the sun setting. Kurenai was holding 2 grocery bags in one hand. She came to a halt in front of the two, smiling at them. Can't even keep track of time, Demi. Kurenai responded lightheartedly, causing the man to chuckle softly. He gave a 2-finger salute. Yeah. Before you ask, he's fine. He returned on time. No incidents, the man said, returning his gaze to the chessboard. Kurenai nodded before walking past him and the other shinobi. Thank you. Knight to c4. Checkmate in 3, Kurenai said as she opened the door to the apartment building that the 2 shinobi were guarding. The other figure, a chubby dark-haired man, grunted. Come on, Kurenai, I had him this time. And he didn't even see it, the man grumbled, catching Kurenai's amused smirk as she disappeared into the apartment building. Naruto's apartment building. Kurenai took the usual route up the stairs, passing through the rat and roach-infested complex to reach Naruto's door. Kurenai didn't knock because she knew it would be open. She walked in calmly, turning around to close and lock the door. Naruto's apartment was sparse. Except for a small dining table with 2 chairs, the living room was nearly empty. Despite being rather empty, the kitchen, which was connected to the living room, was nearly spotless. Kurenai entered the kitchen, placing her bags on the counter and opening the refrigerator door. A small sigh escaped her lips. There was food in glass containers still in the fridge, exactly where she had left it. He still hadn't eaten any of it. Kurenai turned around and reached into one of the grocery bags, pulling out a few groceries and placing them in the fridge. Those items were mostly for herself. She picked up the other bag and left the kitchen, now heading to Naruto's room. The door was partially closed. Kurenai lightly tapped the wood. Sweetie, may I come in? Kurenai asked, her tone completely different from when she spoke to the shinobi outside. Her tone had changed to gentle and soothing. She was met with silence. I'm not going in unless you give me permission out loud, Kurenai warned. Another moment passed before a tiny voice spoke up. See, come in. The voice squeaked, causing a tender, solemn smile to form on Kurenai's painted lips. Hearing his voice told her a lot. but she found many ways to get him to speak. She knew he didn't want to. Kurenai slowly opened the door, closing it behind her. She made her way to the small twin-sized bed in the center of the room, where a small body lay. Naruto lay on his side, staring silently at the room wall. Kurenai had noticed his downcast demeanor. As usual, she sat down on the edge of the bed and immediately moved a hand down to slide slender fingers across Naruto's cheek, eventually entangling those digits within the effeminate tween's silky blonde hair. "You didn't even change out of these rags," Kurenai observed as Naruto continued to wear his oversized orange jumpsuit. She could tell that as soon as he got home, he went straight to bed and slept for hours. Naruto remained silent in response to her remark. He did, however, respond to her touch, closing his eyes and leaning his head into her massaging fingers. Kurenai maintained a gentle gaze before leaning down and kissing him on the cheek. For some reason, he seemed to respond favorably to that gesture. Naruto let out a soft, contented sigh as the kiss landed on his brow, tearing his gaze away from the wall to look up at Kurenai. His face as sad as ever. "Let's get ready for bed. Sweetie, I heard you had an eventful day," the woman said quietly. Naruto paused for a moment before rising. Kurenai cast a sidelong glance at the way the top half of his jumpsuit hung loosely from his shoulders. She shook her head lightly as she reached forward to unzip her jacket. "Aruka told me what happened, but I'd like to hear your perspective if that's okay," Kurenai continued after completely unzipping his jumpsuit. She placed her hands on his small shoulders and slid the garment down to reveal Naruto's silky white tank top underneath. This was not what he usually wore underneath that jacket. Naruto wore a simple black t-shirt before meeting Kurenai. Things had changed since Kurenai had entered the picture. Naruto was dressed in a top designed for a girl his age. It had no sleeves and only two thin spaghetti straps to hold it up, exposing Naruto's skinny but slightly pudgy arms. Naruto sat on his buttocks, raising his legs slightly, anticipating what was to come. Kurenai reached both her hands down to grip the band of Naruto's jumpsuit pants without missing a beat. She yanked them down and away from his slender legs, tossing both pieces of that orange outfit into the laundry basket inside the nearby closet. When those pants were removed from Naruto's body, his exceptionally wide hips were revealed, concealed by a silky pair of matching white panties. The front of the panties had a small pink bow design. Kurenai placed her hands along Naruto's hips, thumbing affectionately into his smooth skin. Kurenai lifted Naruto's tiny form with little effort, the woman scooting back on the bed a little to accommodate his panty-clad rump between her legs. Naruto's back was facing her, her pelvis pressing into his backside. Kurenai wrapped her thighs around his hips, reaching into the grocery bag to pull out a large comb. Naruto raised both of his scrawny arms to grab a bunch of his own hair, pushing the thick locks to the side a little. Kurenai smiled contentedly, gathering his hair in one of her hands as Naruto presented the strands to her. Kurenai gently combed her silky mane with her free hand. "Begin at the beginning," Kurenai instructed. Naruto hesitantly turned his head to the side to look at her before nodding and lightly bowing his head in thought. "I saw Hinata first," he said in a barely audible high-pitched voice. Kurenai maintained a gentle smile while remaining silent to allow him to continue. Seeing this, Naruto took his time before proceeding. "She was nice like a ways," the boy continued. Kurenai slowly groomed Naruto's hair while Naruto went over his day. She was very patient, which was a godsend because Naruto took his time explaining things, taking multiple long pauses throughout his summary of the day. Kurenai would ask follow-up questions to press him for more information, anything to keep him talking. That went on for a while. Before they knew it, an hour had passed, and the sun had completely set. Kurenai looked out the one window in the room to see the streetlights turning on. "Okay, Naru-chan, shower time. After that, I wanted to show you something. I got you a gift," Kurenai said quietly, putting her brush to the side and wrapping both her arms around Naruto's waist. She leaned her chin against his shoulder, which she'd discovered he liked. Kurenai had been experimenting for the past few weeks since she was assigned to be Naruto's guardian. She fought for this position, being rather direct and insistent with the Hokage. Naruto closed his eyes and nuzzled his cheek into hers, resting his arms over hers and sighing contentedly. She's been holding him like his mother did so often. A ghostly figure lay peacefully on her back across Naruto's bed behind the two. Kyuubi had been watching the whole time, as she always did. In fact, before Kurenai arrived, Kyuubi had been cuddling her son in her physical form. Of course, she always vanished before Kurenai could notice her. Kyuubi shifted her weight to her side, resting her head against her forearms as one of her brows raised. This should be exciting. Kurenai had gotten Naruto quite a few gifts since becoming his guardian. Mostly clothing and a few items for Naruto's apartment. While the rest of Naruto's apartment was empty, Naruto's room now had many more items. A desk and lamp, as well as fluffy white bed sheets and pillows. Even a new mattress. Naruto's dresser and closet were stuffed with new clothes. She'd even gotten him new kunai and kunai pouches with her own money. Kyuubi, for one, didn't mind Kurenai spending so much time with her son. Jealousy was alien to a demon. All that mattered was that her son was safe. There was only one problem, which she was still hesitantly bringing up in short bursts. Though, for the time being, she wanted her son to focus on the little things rather than the big ones. Kyuubi was always thinking far ahead. When Kurenai mentioned the gift, Naruto turned his head to the side, his gaze fixed on her face. "A gift?" Naruto inquired sweetly. Kurenai smiled warmly before leaning forward to kiss his nose. A small blush tinted his cheeks, and the tiniest, most subtle smile formed across his lips. Kurenai couldn't help but smile. "I'll show you, Naru-chan. But only after the shower, you're so impatient," the woman teased while affectionately squeezing his waist. Naruto bowed his head in shame and nodded in agreement. Naruto didn't ignore the fact that Kurenai was treating him like a girl, and even referring to him as a girl. To be honest, it wasn't much different from how his mother had treated him ever since she had adopted him. Being referred to as a girl was unusual. However, the difference in how he was treated was minimal. It felt good to have someone believe in him, especially during these trying times. "Go, I'm going to take care of a few things," Kurenai said, prompting Naruto to nod again. He tentatively stood up and prepared to walk away, but not before turning around and leaning forward to wrap his arms around Kurenai's neck, engulfing her in a passionate hug. Kurenai gladly embraced him before patting his buttocks. "Hurry, sweetie," she said softly, causing Naruto to nod, the little tween pulling away and turning around. As he did so, he caught his mother's eye. "Be careful, sweetheart. You know what can happen if you get too close," Kyuubi cautioned, her voice concerned. Naruto saunters towards the room's door, nodding solemnly. "I know," Naruto said quietly as he approached the door via the link. Naruto stole a glance back toward Kurenai and the ghostly form of his mother behind her as he grabbed the door handle and opened it. They were both looking at him. He bowed his head before closing the door behind him. Kurenai was fascinated by Naruto's movement. The boy possessed a sensuality that was unusual for someone his age for such a frail and vulnerable being. Naruto's hips swayed like his mother's, sultrily from side to side. Even in his emotionally vulnerable state, Naruto couldn't help but move in the same way he always did, albeit a little more meekly. Kurenai was surprised that he had passed for a boy the entire time. She had heard that he acted very differently at school. The only way to tell this Naruto was a boy was to see him naked, and she didn't think he was old enough for any of his classmates to have seen him naked. Kurenai pondered these things as she took a scroll from a nearby dresser. She was to keep a daily journal and report on her progress with Naruto. When Naruto entered the bathroom, he closed and locked the door behind him, lowering his hands to shimmy his panties down his slender legs and step out of them. The effeminate tween then raised his arms as a pair of furry hands pressed against his hips. Delicate fingers slid up Naruto's petite form, tracing his curves until they were able to grab the bottom hem of his silky tank top and pull it up and off the blonde. When Naruto turned around, he was met with his mother's fiery red slitted eyes in her physical form, the woman being completely naked. The shower faucet began to turn on its own, seemingly guided by an unseen force. Naruto grabbed her hand as she led him into the shower with her. Kyuubi squeezed some shampoo into her palm before dipping both her hands into Naruto's hair and massaging his scalp. Kurenai also gave me the fragrant shampoo and soap. "I'm not trying to ruin your fun, sweetheart," Kyuubi explained, prompting Naruto to turn around and face her. He raised one dainty hand in front of her. Kyuubi smiled tenderly before reaching down to take Naruto's hand into her own. The woman then knelt down and pressed a long, lingering kiss against the back of it. "Please don't worry about that, mother. I'm already aware of the dangers of growing too close to humans," Naruto explained neutrally. Kyuubi looked into his eyes as she kissed his hand, the woman taking her time to kiss each of his knuckles before pulling back. "Of course, sweetheart. You know I worry. I want you to be able to enjoy yourself," the woman continued, returning both her hands to Naruto's hair. Naruto cast a thoughtful glance off to the side. "I enjoy her affection, but I know it won't last," he said before pausing. "Her affection nice, but it's not what I truly want. What I need. There is only one person's affection I truly seek right now, besides you," the boy continued as his face began to scrunch up. He wrapped his arms around his belly. Just thinking about her, about not having her, it was almost too much. Hyuubi nodded, pulling Naruto's head into her naked breasts as she continued to massage his scalp and lather his hair. I know, baby. I know. She could. How much longer? I don't think I can take this much longer. If I don't see her soon, Naruto whimpered, a small trail of tears falling down his cheek. Hyuubi paused her massage, grabbing Naruto around the waist and pulling him down as she sat in the bathtub with her legs crossed. She sat Naruto on her lap as the shower water continued to fall on them. Hyuubi remained silent, the woman tenderly cradling her baby while looking past his shoulders, allowing him to sob in her arms. Despite this, Hyuubi had a subtle smile along her face. He's almost ready. Midnight. A while later, Naruto stood alone in front of the bathroom mirror, wrapping a large towel around his head in a honeycomb pattern. A knock rang against the bathroom door as he did so. Are you decent, Naru-chan? Inquired Kurenai from the other side. Naruto cast a hesitant glance toward the door. He wore a pink towel around his waist. Yes, the boy said. Kurenai opened the door as he whispered those words, holding the same bag. When she looked upon Naruto, the woman's expression softened. She shook her head lightly. I thought you said you were decent, Kurenai said in exasperation while grabbing a larger towel from the nearby towel bar. She stood behind Naruto and unwrapped his towel, completely revealing his naked body to her eyes. Kurenai set his towel aside before replacing it with the larger towel. Instead of wrapping the towel around his waist, Kurenai wrapped it around his chest, allowing it to flow down and cover his entire body in the same way a woman would wear a towel. Now you're decent, she said as she tucked the towel in properly. Naruto noted the technique, nodding his head in understanding. Oh okay, he said gently, his arms still raised, as the boy finished tying the other towel around his head the way Kurenai had taught him. He'd never learned these practices because his mother was a demon. He'd simply go to bed naked after bathing and drying off naturally or with demon fire. These were human practices that had no bearing on the life of a demon. He bathed in the river the majority of the time. But really even that wasn't necessary. Demons bathed in fire. Soap, water, and shampoo were all extraneous. They were, however, courteous. Hyuubi was definitely enjoying Kurenai teaching Naruto these practices. Hyuubi, who had lived on the human plane for over 1,000 years, was well aware of these practices, but she rarely engaged in them herself. At least not until recently. How about that gift? Kurenai asked, dropping the bag on the nearby toilet seat. Naruto remained silent, unable to contain his curiosity. I was surprised when you said your favorite color was black. It's so different from the bright orange you always wear, she continued before pulling an outfit from her bag. I thought I'd get you something more appropriate. No more hiding who you are, Kurenai said while holding the outfit in front of Naruto. The boy's eyes widened in surprise, and he grabbed the top, holding it in front of his chest with teary eyes. Thank you, he said flatly. Kurenai smiled down at him before pulling something else from his bag. There is more. Drop your towel, sweetie, she instructed. Without hesitation, Naruto reached behind his back to unfasten the towel and let it fall freely from his body, revealing his naked form once more. Naruto was embarrassed to be naked in front of Kurenai at first, but he had grown accustomed to it. When she first became his guardian, he was all but useless. He had no will to move, leave the bed, eat, or even bathe himself. So Kurenai assisted him for a while. He was only recently well enough to do those things on his own. She could tell he was getting better, at least by the standards she used to assess his mental health. Unbeknownst to her, Naruto's mental state, while changing and appearing to improve, wasn't improving quite along the lines she perceived. When Naruto's naked figure was revealed, Kurenai kneeled down to press a small garment against his ankles. Instantly Naruto lifted up one foot, then the other, stepping into a pair of cottony panties that Kurenai began to shimmy up his body and settle around those wide hips of his. These panties had innocent polka dot designs on them. Kurenai then held out something in front of Naruto's face. It looked like a roll of tape, but the material was a white cloth. Do you know what this is? Kurenai questioned. Naruto shook his head. Kurenai didn't think he would. She moved her free hand forward to begin unwrapping the roll. Lift your arms, the woman commanded. Naruto instantly complied. As he did, Kurenai began to wrap the cloth around his chest, making several loops before finally settling a sticky end securely along his side. Naruto tilted his head as he looked in the mirror. These are bindings. Many female shinobi wear them underneath their uniform. It helps keep their breasts still and secure. Depending on the size of the shinobi's breasts, she would even appear to be flat-chested. Kurenai explained while wrapping her arms around Naruto's waist. Naruto's eyes widened when realizing where she was going with this, a harsh blush spreading across his cheeks. That reaction drew a very large knowing grin from the women. She then helped him into the outfit she got for him. It was similar to the outfit that many female shinobi wore. Black cargo pants with a strap to hold a kunai pouch. The pants were exceptionally tight, however, hugging the boy's legs, hips and ass rather closely. No need to be ashamed of what you have. From now on you get to be yourself. No more hiding, Hiranai whispered while trailing a palm along his rump, feeling along the tight fabric. Naruto glanced back at her tentatively but didn't say anything, letting the woman do as she pleased. Initially, Kurenai was very surprised to find out that Naruto was a boy. She immediately assumed that despite being a boy, he desired to be more feminine. This theory of hers was solidified in her mind when she discovered that Naruto acted completely different at school. She came to the conclusion that he hid who he was at school because he didn't think he'd be accepted. Allowing him to embrace his feminine side was one way she thought she could help him heal. At least that's the way she explained it to the Hokage. Secretly, her intentions were a bit more selfish. Honestly, she just thought he looked cute. It helped that Naruto seemed to genuinely enjoy her treatment. Plus, he never complained, making Kurenai grow more bold in her feminization of the boy. Fits perfectly, she cooed while securing the top of that outfit over Naruto's torso. It was a dark fishnet shirt similar to what Midnight wore. It was slightly see-through so the bindings that Naruto wore were visible. It cut off at the waist, the contrast between the dark fabric of that shirt and Naruto's fair skin doing even more to accentuate his wide hips. The last garment was a shinobi vest, lined with many pockets. It also cut off around the waist. It was rather heavy, a small bit of plating sewn into the material for extra protection of the torso. Is it too heavy? Kurenai asked in concern. Naruto shook his head. Despite there being no muscle really visible on Naruto's petite frame, the boy had the strength of a demon. Kurenai, nodding in a pleased fashion, taking some time to strap a kunai pouch to Naruto's leg. She filled his vest with various things. A few more weapons, a first aid kit, a needle and thread. It was rather efficient as a garment. Now I just liked this and thought of you when I saw it. You don't have to wear it if you don't want to. You don't have to wear any of this if you don't like it, Kurenai stated while idly shuffling through the bag. Naruto couldn't take his eyes off the mirror. He looked completely different than his Dobby self. The outfit did well to highlight his every curve and almost every detail of his feminine figure. After some shuffling around, Kurenai finally retrieved that item. It was a small black hair clip. Very simple and not flashy, but still very feminine. Kurenai grabbed a few bits of Naruto's bangs and slid the hair clip into place. The bright blonde of Naruto's hair made that hair clip all the more notable. Finally done, Kurenai stepped away, moving to the side out of the frame of the mirror so Naruto stood there by himself. Do you like it? It's my first try. Please tell me if you don't. If you think it's too much I could get something else, Kurenai blabbered on, the woman raising a hand to lightly rub through her own hair nervously. Naruto shifted his weight to one hip, wrapping his arms around his belly idly and canting his head to the side. There was a small smile painted across his luscious lips. Demons don't get jealous, but I'm jealous, Kyuubi commented in a huff. Hearing his mother speak that way caused a soft giggle to erupt from Naruto's throat. He raised a dainty hand in front of his lips and closed his eyes, trying and failing to stifle his joyous laughter. Kurenai was dumbfounded, staring in disbelief at the effeminate boy. She had never heard him laugh. Naruto's laughter was angelic, pure, innocent. He turned to Kurenai with a sweet smile. I like it, he whispered with a soft blush. Kurenai grinned brightly, the woman nodding her head. I'll make sure to get more like it. You'll need a change of clothes throughout the week, she insisted. You look so pretty, Naruto-kun ... or should I say, Naruto-chan, spoke a weak voice from inside Naruto's head. The boy's eyes widened when hearing that voice. Midnight, you can see me? He questioned quickly. He hadn't heard from Midnight all day. These talks were becoming less frequent. Yes, so pretty, she whispered in a fading voice. Naruto's face immediately showed his distress. He closed his eyes and released a breath to calm himself before slowly opening his lids into a saucy, half-lidded gaze. The tween then began to twirl around in place to model his outfit. After a moment he came to a stop, raising his scrawny arms up to delve slender fingers within his own hair. Naruto fluffed up those golden locks teasingly while fluttered his lashes towards the mirror. In response to that display, Naruto heard a low growl resound through the demonic link. When I get ... out of here, I'm going to ravish you. The girl's voice rumbled out lustfully. She sounded much stronger as she spoke that sentence. Naruto nodded his head before placing two perfectly trimmed digits against his lips and blowing a kiss into the mirror. The last thing Naruto heard before the connection was severed was Midnight's pleased purring. Kurenai watched the entire scene with an expression of confusion and disbelief. Where did this sudden behavior come from? When Midnight's presence was gone, Naruto's posture completely changed. His shoulders dropped, the boy squeezing his arms around his body in a vulnerable manner. Tears streamed from his eyes, the effeminate adolescent dropping to his knees and sobbing quietly to himself. Kurenai was completely at a loss. She didn't understand at all what was going on. But Naruto was crying. She needed to comfort him. The woman darted forward quickly and dropped to her knees as well, embracing his small body and pulling him into her. "Shhh, it's okay, she whispered. Naruto sobbed quietly into her covered breasts. "Midnight, please come back to me." Somewhere far away, Midnight now stared up at the ceiling, still strapped to that table. She was alone. One of the few moments of reprieve from her torment. There was a device poking into her ribs, a drill that was constantly rotating into her flesh. It was supposed to prevent her from sleeping. She hadn't had a good night's sleep in 2 weeks. Despite the drill, she did manage to rest, the pain numbing after a while. Her mind wandered, the girl's thoughts now completely fixated on the image of Naruto's modeling and tantalizing movements. Both her tails were strapped down to the table, one of them had its tip cut off. It was in the process of growing back, a process which was made much slower because her chakra was restricted. Her other tail, while holding a few bruises and scratches, was relatively fine. Midnight moved that tail, testing the bindings. It was bound by a chain snaking around most of the length. With a small grunt, Midnight lashed her tail upward, completely destroying the chains that bound the limb. Metal flew all across the room, clinking about. With her tail free, Midnight looked down at the tip with a pleased smirk before sliding the furry appendage down her belly, across her pelvis, to finally sneak under the band of her panties. The girl then arched her back, a sensual moan escaping her lips. "Thank you, my love."
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.